Hello, everyone. Today we are continuing. We're almost done with our N5 lessons. We've got just two more. And today we'll be talking about verbs, various ways that we can use verbs beyond what we've done already. And we're going to talk about three different patterns. The three patterns have absolutely no relationship to one another. They're kind of, as we're at the end of N5, or the beginner level, we're kind of in the assorted category of materials. So we're taking things that are kind of similar and globbing them all together. And so we'll approach these one at a time, but keep in mind that they aren't really tied together. Okay, so we've got three different things we're going to be looking at, and you see them up on the screen. But who cares? Let's skip this because again, they're not linked together. Let's look at them one at a time. Now, this one is one that you see quite a lot in Japanese because it is actually the verb form of something we've already practiced. And just as a way to lead into this, real fast, I typed in the channel. Does anyone remember what ya does? What's the job of ya? Anyone? When you see ya in a sentence, remember it comes in between two nouns. So if I say something like kare ya ramen, my two go-to foods, Japanese foods, it means and. So the first person that answered is correct. But what does it imply? And that's the second person. So those two answers together, perfect combination. It is used to start a list of things, usually two to three. Usually two to three. Just like in English, you tend not to list too many things in a single sentence, but the ya specifically says that there are other things in this list that aren't being mentioned. So if I say, let's expand the sentence out, let's keep it real simple. If I say, I like curry and ramen, but I use the ya, I am suggesting, well, not suggesting, I'm saying, I'm just not specifying that there are other foods I like as well. And these are just two items from that list. I'm taking two, the list is longer, I'm just not going to mention them. So in English, we might say etc., we might say and so on, and other things. We might say things like, I like things like curry and ramen. There's different ways we can say it. And those aren't all exactly the same information wise, but they all have the same kind of force in that we're taking a subset of a list. Now, of course, there are times we want to talk about actions, things that we do, want to do, have done, but we don't want to list everything out. And so what do? We use this, I'm going to call it the tari tari. That doesn't really mean anything, but tari suru is something that we can use to talk about multiple actions and emphasize that those are not the only two actions that we're doing. Now, you might think, oh no, we have a new verb form, I have to learn new conjugations. You don't. The good thing about this is while when you're inside Renshu, it will mark it up as, what does it say? Let's pop over. It says tari form. And so it's listed as a separate conjugation inside of Renshu. However, the way that you make it is extremely simple. All you have to do is, as the screen shows you, you take the casual past form that we've already learned. So, if you have the word taberu, for example, we have tabeta is the past form, nomu is nonda, kao as in you bought something is katta. It's all those the ta-da forms. And you take those and you add ri to the end of it. And that's it. Ri in itself, like that one character ri, doesn't really hold any meaning. But for me, it's easiest to internalize it as, tari or dari, the tari form. And so the interesting thing is that what you do here is, let's take a look at this. We're talking about looking reading, or seeing and reading, looking or seeing and reading, dot, 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 and other things. When we do this, we need to have the suitor verb on the end. So all the verbs that we are listing out as part of the list, we use that ri form. So mitari, yondari, and then suru or shimasu or whatever form you happen to have at the end is going to come at the end. This isn't the same, not at all, but almost if we're looking at an order of words kind of sense, we talked about nado in a previous lesson, that nado is at the end of a non-exhaustive list. And this one kind of works in the same way. In that we're talking about, a few things. We're going to end it not with nado this time. We're going to end it with shimasu. And this is required. This is not something that drops out. You need that, even in casual forms, you're going to need that shimasu at the end. So let's take a look at a few examples of sentences. So here we have two things to compare the two. So the first one is something that, we've seen before. We use the te form to link two actions. And so if we say, for example, if we say, eigo mite hono yomu, there's two things we're implying here. Well, not implying, we're saying them. We're saying, first off, the movie happens first, the book happens second. It's the normal thing that we use in English too. We mention, the first thing that happens, then the next thing. In addition, there's no suggestion that anything else is happening. Like if I say that first sentence, I'm saying, for example, today, you're going to say, what are you going to do today? I'm going to watch a movie and read a book or books. That's it. That's all I'm planning to do. And I'm doing those in that order. That movie's coming first, and then books coming second. However, when we switch it over to the second form, and you're probably noticing there's something different with that second sentence, and I'll get to that in just a second. Those two things fall out. We are no longer talking about we are explicitly seeing the movie first and then reading the book second. We might be, but we're not specifying that information. On top of that, it could be that there's other things that we're doing. But these are just the two that we happen to mention. You might be drawing pictures, you might be studying on Renshu, but the things you're going to tell the other person, I'm watching movies, reading books and stuff. It's kind of like that and stuff that pops up. Although this tari tari suru is not in any way, a casual form. You can use it in polite language as well. Now, before we look at these one more time, look at that second sentence. And aside, this is a bit of a step outside from what we're learning today. But aside from this tari tari suru form that we're learning, do you notice anything else with this sentence? And maybe you're thinking, oh, Renshu made a mistake. Shouldn't that be that? Do you see anything? I see a couple of people typing. You can't see it in the stream. So yes, no whoa, no oh. And this is a question that comes up so often on Renshu. People throw them up as questions under specific sentences. And today's lesson is kind of short. So let me take a minute to step aside and talk about this a bit. You'll notice that both of these sentences are casual form sentences. The ending verb is in the short form. It's yomu, not yomimasu. It's suru, not shimasu. And so we're already speaking at a casual level. When you're speaking casually, you're not required to by any means, but one of the things with both polite and casual levels in Japanese is that there's sublevels. And as a beginner, they're not ones you need to worry about too much. You don't have to think about, oh, should I be going down this level of casualness? That's not necessary at all. However, there are different things you can do. So the first level of casualness is that verb form at the end. But something else that often happens is that you start to drop particles. You make the sentence shorter and you start to drop particles. And this is the general rule. It might be the perfect rule, but I'm going to say general for now. The particles that get dropped are o, wa, and ga. Now, how can you remember that these are the ones that you're allowed to drop? And so the ones you can't drop, by the way, for example, are ones like this. De, ni, e, and to. The way to remember which ones you're allowed to drop. So in the second sentence, we're dropping the o out of it. Again, we're not required to. It would sound just as natural and just as okay if we said ega o, ego mitari. But ega mitari is also okay. So how do we remember which ones we can drop? We've studied this particle, mo. And mo is kind of it's kind of a Kirby. It's got this Kirby form inside of Japanese, in that it usurps someone else's power. Like it takes over another particle. And so if you don't know what I'm saying, you know, you might say something like, and we're going really simple here. Kare ga suki desu. And then ramen. If I can type it out correctly. Ramen mo suki desu. And you can see that if that sentence wasn't following the first sentence, you said it by itself, you would say ramen ga suki desu. Or maybe ramen wa suki desu, depending on the context. So the mo replaces the ga. It takes over the ga and says, sorry ga, you're done here. I'm jumping in. It can also do that for wa. It can also do that for o. So you could say kare o tabemashita. Ramen mo tabemashita. The ones that you can replace with mo are also the ones that you can drop out in casual forms. So the de, ni, and to, those are ones that if you have a mo, and you've probably seen this before, you don't replace, you know, if you have gakko de in a sentence, and then you're also going to talk about toshokan de in the next sentence, so not at the school and at the library as well. You know, you can't replace the de. You do this, de mo. It gets attached to the end. And so mo will replace those three particles. It will attach itself to everything else. In casual forms, all those ones that mo eats up, Kirby style, those are the ones that you can drop out. Okay, side lesson done. Let's jump back to what we're doing. So to recap real fast, the difference between these. The first sentence, we're talking about watching a movie first, reading a book second. Now, you might be doing other things that day, but you're not suggesting that there are other things going on. All you're suggesting is that you do these two things. The second one, watching movies, reading books, doing something else. Who knows the order that I'm doing them in? I'm just telling you, I'm doing some stuff today. Here's a couple of things I'm doing. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Now, I've given you two. Here we have two examples. We have two taris here. Well, tari and dari. Mitari, yondari. You can go longer. So you could say, Yasumi no hi ni yoku nettari, ryori o shitari, hashitari shimasu. That's fine. You can also go in the other direction. So let's jump back to this previous sentence. I'm going to type this one out, but I'm going to change this a little bit. And again, since I'm typing it and I can't put furigana inside the Discord, I'm keeping it to, I'm trying to not focus on the Kirby on the screen. You can do this. The tari typically has two or more verbs listed in it, but it's not required. You can say this, 映画を見たりする. So here you have a list of presumably two or more things, but you're only mentioning one. That's okay as well. If I had to guess, I'd say average is two. Three is okay. You probably wouldn't go as high as four. You're getting so if you add four verbs, you're getting so many. Why not just list them all? Kind of thing. But you also see one as well. So let's practice this. We're going to go to our tried and true topic of Japan because, that's why we're here. We are interested in Japan for one reason or another, the culture, wanting to live there, study there, take over Japan, who knows. And so let's talk about what you might want to do. So if you go to Japan, now presumably there's not one thing you want to do or two things. There's probably 10 or 100. What are the top two things that you might want to do? So I'm going to give you the first half of the sentence because I don't want you all to have to rewrite it over and over again. So I'm going to say this. Okay. 日本に行くときは So when the time that I go to Japan, when I go to Japan, what do you want to do? Now think about want. How do you say want here? You don't change any of that tari stuff. You're not trying to jam the shtai form, the tai form in there. You have that suru form on the end. That's where you make your changes. So if you say, I want to do stuff like this and this and this, just change that suru to shtai or shtai desu at the end, and then you're good. So, like I mentioned just before the lesson started, no one is forced to do this. You don't have to, but we'd love to see you give it a try. So, I'll give everyone a couple of minutes. Again, since this is a beginner lesson, you're free to use kanji, but please type next to it or underneath it the hiragana so those that don't have that kanji knowledge yet can take advantage of your sentence. And I'm going to pretend like I don't live in Japan. And this is probably what 22-year-old me would have said, which is 秋葉原に行ったり、ラーメンを食べたりしたいです. I'm going to sound like an old man here, but back when Akihabara was good, it's not the same as it used to be 20 years ago. It's getting a bit too big box stores. It's losing a bit of the soul that it used to have. Still a cool place, but not the same place it was. Good in a different way. But presumably, I wouldn't go to Akihabara, have some ramen, and go home. I'd do other stuff. I'm just mentioning those two. So those of you watching the stream can't see it because the so and so is typing marker isn't part of the stream, but there are a number of people typing. So I'm just chilling a bit, waiting for them to, try their sentences. Don't worry about mistakes. Mistakes are not only unavoidable, but they're the best way to internalize something when you're learning. Is making that mistake and, learning from it. Oops. Push enter too fast on that one. So for kao, to buy, it would be kattari, not kaitari. Take the past tense form, which would be katta, and then add the ri to the end of it. So kattari. So the first person looks like they want to have onigiri by games, and game is there's a long bar in the middle of it. Let's see. I'm kind of jumping around to what other people are saying. Someone else is talking about the Sapporo, nice, the Sapporo Yuki Matsuri. So that would be you want to take Matsuri is what you want to see for the person that wrote that. So the Mitari would go after that. So I'm cutting off all the adjectives and modifiers that you put in there. But the end, you want that Mitari to come at the end. So nani 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 Matsuri o Mitari. And for the person that's surprised about that dash being in a game, there's something that I do, and there's another user in Renshu that's put up a lot of mnemonics about this. And what they do, and I think this is really effective, is they'll take that bar and make it a part of the mnemonic. They'll take it, they'll make it physical, and they'll think about the thing. So thinking about game, I know all controllers are cordless these days. So maybe for me, we have a Switch here at home, and those little bars kind of look like a Switch controller. So I think, well, Gameu needs that bar because you need one of the Switch controllers to play the game, or something like that. Someone else, to give you another example with ramen, they say, well, ramen needs that bar because you need the noodles. That bar is the noodle. Well, one of the noodles in the ramen. So if you can take that bar and identify it with some part of the word, it makes it really easy to remember those. Otherwise, it's really hard because for us, especially when we're learning it as loan words, like, oh, this used to be an English word. There's often no sense to why there's a dash there. Typing the bar, if you're typing in Japanese, you've got the Japanese IME. It's the minus sign. It's this thing. It's probably, well, I can't remember, but at least on my keyboard, it's to the right of the zero. But it's the minus, as in the plus and minus. But when you've got Japanese turned on, the Japanese IME, it will look like that. Okay, so I skipped over a whole bunch of things, but I see some people talking about they want to see some shrines. Someone wants to ride the Anpanman train. Nice. Eat yakisoba. So a whole bunch of things, which is great. I like to see that everyone's got different stuff that they want to do. Okay, let's continue. The next one is talking about plans. Now, there's actually two ways to talk about plans in Japanese. Actually, three ways. But there's two specific grammar patterns to talk about it. And one of them we will get to in a later lesson, in the N4 lessons. And I'm just going to mention it now. So if you're thinking, hey, isn't there that other one? There's one more that it's not exactly talking about plans, but people often use it to talk about plans, which is not the best fit for it, but it can be used. And it's called tsumori. And it's used for showing intentions. And intentions and plans are kind of the same, but also kind of different. But that won't be discussed today. Today we're going to focus on the one that uses the word that literally means plan, which is yote. And this one's a fairly simple one. And it says, it can mean arrangement, but typically the way I see it translated in most situations is with plan. And it's very flexible in that when you're using it, you can either use a verb, which obviously means an action. We're not talking about verbs as in aru or iru. We're talking about things that you can do. And because plans can be positive or negative, not in the good bad sense, but in the I plan to go or I plan to not go, we can use positive or negative forms. because it is a verb coming in front of a noun, the noun yote, we're going to keep it in the casual form. So we need that casual form. So we'll never say, for example, if I'm planning to eat something, you cannot say this, tabemasu yote. That doesn't work. It will always be the short or casual form. So something like this, taberu yote or tabenai yote. Now nouns also work. But of course, you can't just throw any noun in there. You can't say this. Ringo is not an action. It's a noun that represents an action. Some noun that talks about, oh, this is something I'm going to do. Now we're going to jump into some examples real soon. And typically, because this comes at the end of the sentence, most often, not always, we're going to often end it with the da or des form. There's one more way you can use it, but I'll show that to you in just a second. So let's jump into some examples. So let's say, now I would not recommend this. This is actually a bad sentence because I don't recommend anyone come to Japan in September unless they're going north enough to where they're not going to get melted. Because September it can be in Japan great weather, or it can still be the back end of a burning summer. And you never know. It changes every year. And so September maybe not so great. But let's say you're planning on coming. 9月に日本に行く予定です. I plan to come to Japan in September. And you see everything before yote, you can kind of see that as a sentence. There's a sentence, and then yote is just saying, this sentence is a plan of mine. This is what I'm planning to do. That's all there is to it. Very simple. Now, let's say you're not planning. Now, this is not as common. You often don't talk about what you plan to not do. Unless maybe you're using it as, for example, a contrast. You might be talking about someone else is going. You're like, well, I'm not going. I don't have plans. Because I have plans to go in October, for example. But if you want to use it, all you have to do is switch it to the negative form in the beginning. And here you're saying, I plan to, not go to Japan in September. This works. Now we were talking about those nouns. Nouns that represent actions. They're often events. Your event category of nouns. So if you said you're planning to have a party or to do a party, however you want to phrase it, you'd say 土曜日にパーティーの予定だ or des. And so this works as well. Now, there is one more way to use this. And I mentioned, typically we're going to end it with des or with da. And this would be equivalent to in English saying, I plan to da da da, whatever happens to be. It really doesn't make a difference. I don't feel like it changes anything information wise, but you might also hear this. Instead of yote des, you might see the ga aru. So that's, the difference is I plan to do something or I have plans to do something. Again, does that change in English? No. So does it change in Japanese? Not really. But you will see both forms of it. So just keep that in mind. End it with a des or da, or end it with a ga aru. Now, these first two, jumping back, these first two are pretty specific. Not the ikanai, but the iku. This is a fixed plan. You could jot it into a calendar. You can also use it to talk about plans that are, not quite as specific. So this first one is a specific one, but this is just to show you the contrast. If you're saying I'm planning to meet a friend now, Someone might say, "Oh, do you want to get lunch?" It's like, sorry, I'm going to meet a friend right now. I can't have lunch. Then you might use this first sentence. 今友達に会う予定だ. However, the second one, you know, unless you are talking about your specific, you've already passed whatever exam you need to take in the country you live in to become a doctor, and you know the date that you're going to become a doctor, that's a much less likely case. But if you are planning to become a doctor in the same way that we'd say it in English, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. But you could say something like the second sentence. いつか医者になる予定です. I plan to become a doctor someday, one day. And that's okay. Now, that's all there is to yote. There's one more thing I want to mention, but I'm going to mention it after we practice a little bit. So let's practice. Please, if you feel like sharing, and if you don't want to share something personal, just make it up. Just come up with something. Doesn't matter. This is all for the sake of practicing. So whether what you're saying is true or not really doesn't factor into it. But let's talk about later this week. So you might say, we might say the topic is this weekend, 今週末. So this weekend, what are your plans? A friend's asking, hey, what are you doing this weekend? What are you up to? You say, well, and let's not answer and say I have no plans. That's too simple. Let's come up with something that you're planning on doing, whether it's true or not, and let me know. Keep it simple. You could just, you could say something. You could make it. You could say this. I plan to sleep, and then you're done, and that's a fully formed sentence. You could also talk about places, times, with whom. Add some descriptors in there. Neither answer is better or worse than the other. Whatever you're comfortable putting out, that's a good answer. That's a good sentence. So I'll give those typing a couple of minutes to type out your answer. Give it a shot, and then we'll take a look at them. So our first answer, someone's planning on going to the park, which for this time of year is probably a great idea. It certainly is over here in Japan. It's just the right temperature right now. Not too hot, not too cold. Someone else is thinking a bit bigger. While one person is going to the park, someone else is going to save the world. Although drop that out of it, and then you'll be perfect. And yet another person is keeping things simple in a different way, and they can change into rabbits apparently, and that's what they're gonna do. So good for them. Someone else is being a show off, and I mean that in the best way. That's awesome. They are combining the lesson we just learned with what we did now. They're talking about various things that they're doing. And so you might, I think it's still on the screen, just above the fluffy bunny. Someone else is going to wash their cat, go for a walk, and other things. And they plan to do that. So they got both of those put together. Great. And I'm just responding to a few. Okay. Well, I am happy to tell you. And then you have a new word too. So konshimatsu. So shimatsu is referring to Saturday and Sunday, so both days. So if you're talking about both days and you're going to study Japanese, the rest of the sentence is fine, by the way. It's great. I would probably say something like this: Konshimatsu wa. This is a fun word, and it means for the entire time, all the way. It can be a fixed time. It can people talk about it to refer to like the rest of your life. I'll always love you, kind of thing. Zutto, and it's fun to say, so it should go into sentences. It doesn't refer to the day, the specific time. So you already mentioned the time in the topic by saying this weekend. And so then you don't need to say all day or whole day. You just say zutto. And it's like all the time I just mentioned this weekend, I'm going to be studying Japanese. If you wanted to talk about a single day and say all day, you'd probably say ichinichi. And it's literally one day or a day. But if you put ichinichi in front of an action, it usually means that you're going to do that thing for a day. So, in other words, for the whole day. But I love that you're trying and that other people are trying as well. It's easy to only use the words you know, but it always helps you to learn to try and use words that you're not quite sure of, or to say, let me push these two things together and see if it makes sense. And that's how you get better. It's a vital skill. All right, I see one more person typing something out, but please continue. A couple people. I'm going to slowly transition into the next and last grammar expression for today. But so far, we've gotten much more participation than we usually do, which is great. I'm loving it. All right, last one. This one, this particular panel kind of makes me go, "What's this? Looks like a mess." It's not actually as bad as it looks, and you'll see because you might see that as a full line of text, or we're going to see it broken up into pieces. The key word here is hajimete. Now, I'm typing it out in kanji first. When you type it out, if you're using Japanese, your IME on your keyboard or whatever, there's a chance that this one will appear. Now, this one means to begin something. There's two verbs that are very similar, but when we use this particular grammar form, we are only using the first one. And it doesn't mean to begin, it means first. So, with that in mind, you can probably guess as to which of the two you use when you say hajimemashite when you meet someone for the first time. And it's the same one as this one. Now, this one is an excellent way of talking about something that's happening or something that you're doing for the first time. And there's a number of different ways we can use it. So let me real quickly talk about three different ways. Hajimete, again, we've seen this before, and we've probably seen it in the past as this. So, for example, 今日は you've probably seen this. And this is okay. 今日は初めて寿司を食べました. Today I ate sushi for the first time. Now this one is a slightly different way of doing it. And this one introduces an element that we're going to talk about in great detail at the N4 slash pre-intermediate level. For now, let me, I'll get to that in about 30 seconds. But look at the first one. Uh, the first one is using a noun. And this one actually, now we've been talking about verbs today, but this one can work with a noun. And when you talk about the noun here, it doesn't necessarily have to be an event. For example, looking at the cat that's right in front of us. Now, something tells me that that cat, that's not the first time it's had salmon. Or that looks like tuna. However, it's possible that it's the first time that it's had, a roll. And so you might, in this one, you can use just whoops, about any noun, but you could say sushi wa hajimete desu. And it seems like a simple sentence, but there's a lot packed in there. When you use hajimete, you're saying my experience with whatever I just said, it's the first time. And so here, reading into the context, we're probably talking about eating. If you're at a cooking school, then maybe you're talking about this is my first time to cook sushi, or not cook, but make sushi. So it doesn't specify. It's just saying my experience with this is the first time of it for it. Now, with the second two examples that we're seeing here, we're going to see some actual sentences in just a minute. But the thing I want you to notice is that there's something in here that kind of seems strange. So look at the verb and the verb past. It's on the screen right now. And is there anything in there that makes you say what's going on there? Any ideas? I know that's kind of a vague question. If you don't know, it's fine. So this is probably, I think, the first time that we've seen no appearing in front of a noun. Not noun, sorry, appearing behind my what I said was completely wrong. Appearing behind a verb. Verbs don't have particles after them, right? This is something called, and this is a big word, and I didn't know this word, even though I'm sure my teachers taught it to me when I was young. I did not know it until I became an English teacher. It's something called nominalization. Once again, I'm going to say nominalization. And in layman's terms, nominalization is taking a verb or anything really and changing it into a noun. So it is taking, you know, we in English we have words like eat. Eat's a verb. Does anyone know what the noun forms of eat are? There's two. There's two ways to express um, a verb as a noun in English. Once you see it, everyone's going to say, "Oh, I know that," but there's a good chance you haven't thought about the words this way. Eating, yes, eating is one of them. There's one more. Not a, not eat, and it's actually two words. It's not a you keep eat the same, you add something to it. You put another word next to eat. To eat. There we go. Those are both nouns. They function as nouns in sentences. So, I like ramen. You can't say I like eat. That doesn't work. You say I like, because you need a noun there. I like eating. I like to eat. Japanese has the same thing. You can't just have verb when you usually have a noun in its spot. So a no, and again, we'll go into this in more detail later on, no is taking that verb and basically saying, hey, you're not a verb anymore, you're a noun. Okay, rest of the sentence, don't get angry. There's no verb here, there's just a noun. So for now, I want you to just remember this as a pattern. No wa hajimete, or, well, they're both no wa hajimete. And a verb's going to come before it, either present tense or past tense. We will get into detail later on. I'm skipping all these things below because we've already talked about this. But for now, I feel it's best cognitively, so your brain doesn't melt, just to see it as a pattern. And then later on, you learn about what's inside of a pattern. And that's how we, usually break down new information. Okay. So let's take a look at a few examples. So, first one, matcha or green tea. Matcha wa hajimete desu. If you say this, there's no verb in there. There's no action in there. But usually, based on what you're saying, you can get a pretty good feel. You're probably talking about drinking it. Because when people talk about matcha, especially the first time of doing something with matcha, they're probably not talking about buying it or looking at it. They're probably talking about drinking it. So matcha wa hajimete desu. And that's all there is to it. Let's take a look at the second sentence. Now this one, we're specifying the noun. Or not the noun, we're specifying the action, the verb. So we're talking about a tanuki. And we're talking about seeing a tanuki. So tanuki o miru no wa hajimete desu. So again, we wouldn't say in English, I see tanuki, or rather, sorry, actually this doesn't translate in English well enough for you to make that point. Let me back up. Here, before the wa in Japanese, you always need a noun. Nouns have to come there. A topic has to be a noun. And so we're taking see a tanuki and we're changing it to seeing a tanuki. Super, super literally translating this, seeing a tanuki is first, or my first time. Or more naturally, it's my first time seeing a tanuki. It's my first time to see a tanuki. Either one works. But we need that no in there. Now here, looking at this first one, tanuki o miru no hajimete desu. This is something you would say right then when you saw it. Like tanuki just appeared in front of you. And you're like, wow, it's my first time to see a tanuki. Great. This is so cool. And that's why we're using miru. However, if you are talking about something that's already happened, you're the first time doing something happened 10 minutes ago, it happened a day ago, it happened a year ago, then you would use the past tense. So you're talking now, but you're talking about something that happened in the past. この本を読んだのは初めてです. And that works as well. Now, since these are things that you're doing for the first time, there's no negative form. Or at least there's no negative form in the initial action. With verbs, we were talking about, I have plans to go to Japan. I have plans to not go to Japan, or I don't have plans to go to Japan. Here, you can't say, it's my first time to not do something. That doesn't really make quite as much sense. However, excuse me, you will often see the end of it negated. So let me give you a quick little dialogue. So let's say you're in Japan and maybe you have a Japanese friend and they're taking you, let me show you all the things. Let's do all the Japanese stuff. And they say to you, they give you that first sentence, but they give it to you in a question form. They say, Matcha wa hajimete desu ka? Is it your first time having matcha? And you'd probably say, or I would say, so I recommend you say this, You might say something like this, hajimete janai desu. So you're taking matcha is my first time and you're negating the whole thing. So matcha is my first time? No, it's not my first time. I've had it before. So you tend, with this one, you tend to see the negation coming at the end of the sentence. That's it. That's our lesson for today. We had 3 completely unrelated verb topics, but these are ones that you do hear. Hajimete, not quite as much because, you know, you do things all the time, every day, but doing things for the first time, not as often. However, as language learners, you are looking into a new world, and so when you go to Japan, hopefully in the future, there's a lot of things, or just learn about Japan, see anime for the first time, or see a Ghibli film, or whatever. There's going to be a lot of firsts for you. So this hajimete desu is going to, come up then. The other two, though, you're going to see, happen a lot. Yote and the taritari. Someone, just real fast before you end things, someone said, I don't need to specify the verb. Oh, that's correct. You're talking about the dialogue I gave. Yes. When someone asks you a question, it's always important to remember that, generally speaking, you don't need to repeat most of what they said. And so you don't need to, with this one, matcha wa hajimete desu, the noun's not mentioned or specified because it's assumed. We're looking at the sentence in isolation. We just see the sentence here. But thinking about when it would actually come up, it's when you're sitting at a cafe in Japan and they bring out some tea. And the person that's with you says, "Hey, matcha wa hajimete desu ka?" Excuse me for a sec. And they don't have any verb in there, but there's tea sitting in front of you, and you're like, okay, this is about drinking it, right? So you don't need to mention that. And then in the answer form, if they're asking you, notice that I didn't have to say matcha wa hajimete janai desu. You need something. So I'm leaving the hajimete in there, but you don't need to specify anything else that they mentioned in the question form. But good question. Anyway, that's all. We're out of time for today. Next week we have our last N5 lesson, at least as far as the lessons in Renshu goes. Real fast, just in case you don't know, inside of Renshu, you can go to the menu. I know you can't see the menu in the screen share, but the menu's up in the top left. Go to resources and then Japanese lessons, and this is where you'll find all the videos. If you need to rewatch this video or go and check out the content that we're looking at, it's all here. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you next time. お疲れ様でした。